It probably won't take you very long to read. And I'm like, yes, they are. They are, they're just not talking about it. So I am in touch with reality. Hi, I'm Sock Marionette, doing business as Bargain Counter Argument, and I'm a middle-aged lady in a tiara talking about books. And today is a library returns video. I know, I just did a library haul video and that was fun, but I do actually have some books to return that I have read, or in one case was a DNF, and I'm going to talk about that at length. But first, the books that don't really require too much explanation. Crazy Stupid Bromance and Isn't It Bromantic, both by Lyssa Kay Adams from the Romance Book Club series. I read the first book, which I believe was called Romance Book Club. I didn't actually read it. I read about 25-30% of it several years ago. I didn't care for it. I didn't like the lead characters. I thought that it was a second chance. They were getting a divorce, and I was just like reading it. I'm like, the problems in your marriage could have been solved with a few difficult conversations. And so I DNF'd it because I think that second chance is such a fine line. The writer needs to come up with a compelling reason why these people split up, but not so insurmountable that it doesn't feel realistic that they'd get back together again. The same with third act breakups. I don't mind them as long as they're narratively justified and the ending isn't rushed. However, with Romance Book Club, the first book, I just was reading it. I was like, this was your problem? This is your problem? And I don't know. It just didn't strike me the right way. I didn't really particularly want these people to get back together. I was like, I think they're better off talking it through, sure, but not reconciling. Anyway, however, I decided to try subsequent books. So I read Isn't It Romantic and Crazy Stupid Bromance, like I said. I enjoyed those, actually. I read them both all the way through. I think they were like 3-star reads, which for me, that's like, yeah, I enjoyed this book. I might read something else from this author if the plot sounds like something I would enjoy reading about, if the characters sound like people I would enjoy reading about. It's not like I'm going to read every book by Lyssa Kay Adams, but I might read some more from this series or other of her books if the synopsis and the characters sound like something I would be interested in. So that was that. Slightly more disappointing, Goodnight Beautiful by Amy Malloy. This is a thriller, kind of in a Frida McFadden way, but I don't know, it didn't hit quite the same. It seems like the unreliable narrator shifting perspectives, they just didn't feel earned. It was just like, I felt like they didn't, I kind of liked it and I kind of didn't. So it's just hard to say. I think that there were too many perspective shifts, too many layers of that for a relatively short book. This isn't even 300 pages long, I think. And also the way the shifting narratives and unreliable narrators, the way those work together, I felt like they would have been better as two separate books if those ideas had been explored a little bit more in, like I said, two separate books, because they didn't need to be in the same book. So two separate books would have been better. I mean, I didn't hate it, but I'm not necessarily going to look for other books by Amy Malloy. I don't know that there are that many at this point because she's relatively new on the scene. Here's one I really, really enjoyed, Bourbon and Lies by Victoria Wilder. I've been seeing this around a lot because she's a local author. She lives somewhere in Connecticut. And since I frequent Montgomery and Taggart, Connecticut's first and so far only romance bookstore, when I go in there, there's usually a special display of her stuff out with signed copies and so on. This is actually a library copy I'm reading. So I was aware of her books, and this is on Kindle Unlimited, by the way. So if you are, oh, actually, so is this. This is also on Kindle Unlimited. So, you know, if you want to check it out, I wouldn't get Kindle Unlimited just to read this book, but if you like thrillers, you know, it probably won't take you very long to read. Anyway, so yes, this is on Kindle Unlimited. It's part of, so far, a 3-book series. I don't know if there are plans for more, called The Bourbon Boys. They're set in a fictitious town called Fiasco, Kentucky, which is where the Bourbon Boys have the Fox, with 2 X's, family distillery where they make premium bourbon. And this is the first book in the trilogy, and you have this woman showing up, and it's all very mysterious, and there's romantic suspense, there's banter. It's a fun, good time. I really enjoyed it, and I am actually reading the second book, also out from the library, Bourbon and Secrets. I'm about halfway through this. She's a burlesque dancer, so that's fun. But maybe she does more than just dance the burlesque. Maybe. Also on Kindle Unlimited. And then the third one is called Bourbon and Proof. And I'm going to read that on Kindle Unlimited because the library doesn't have it. So, but I had to take a break from this, not because I wasn't enjoying the book, but because I had to read some other books that were due sooner than this. So it kind of shifted in priorities. So that one's not going back to the library until I finish it, but this one can, because a lot of times when I read a series, I like to keep the first few books out from the library while I finish the rest. I wouldn't say these are standalones, but I don't feel like I need to refer back to this one as I'm enjoying this one and as I go on to enjoy the third. So that can go back. An example of a series where I do want to go back and take a look at the first one, especially since there was a bit of a break between the first one and when I started the second one. And again, having to take a break from the second one for similar reasons about library due dates. And that is Dear Reader by Tate James. I've heard of Tate James, never read anything by her, them. I didn't read the summary for this book. I just saw that it was chapter 1 of Devil's Backbone series. I think there are 3 books so far. I don't know if there are plans for more or if it's complete as a trilogy. Also on Kindle Unlimited. I didn't read the summary. I just sat down and I was like, I am just going to read a few pages to see if it's for me. And the next thing I knew, I was done with this book. It's got some kind of sprayed edges here. And it's a bully romance, but I don't normally like those, but I just kind of got drawn into it. And I was reading it, and you have these guys who belong to this kind of secret society, and they keep doing these really, really awful things, and then gaslighting our female main character, but we are getting his perspective as well. So we understand that there's something off here, and I don't want to talk about what it is. I don't want to spoil it, but I'm really enjoying this series. And this is another one where I have the second book out from the library, and I'll be reading the third on Kindle Unlimited because the library doesn't have it. However, this is one where I am going to be going back and consulting, because after I set this down, and it was a few days before I picked this up, I was reading it and I was like, wait a minute, I don't know that I necessarily remember all the nuances I need to know, which is kind of nice to have a series. I mean, I like an interconnected standalone series, but it's also nice to have a series where the story continues with the, the same characters, the same couple and everything. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And so I am going to be keeping Dear Reader out. And while I enjoy Watch Your Back, and I can't remember what the third one is called. Sorry about that. I also read, this was really, really nice. I saw Tiffany, the Beach Bum Bookworm, did a short subject on this book because she liked it so much. And I was like, oh, that sounds like it's right up my alley. So I'm going to check that out. And I did. And it's A Legend in the Baking by Jamie Wesley. Jamie Wesley, A Legend in the Baking. Anyway, so he's a football player for a made-up San Diego team. And it's the season's just finished. He and his best friends who were in college, well, his best friend from college, they were roommates, and they went through, I think it was UCLA together on the football team, and then they both got selected by the San Diego team. And then another dude came along from a different college and came into the San Diego team, and they all became firm friends. And they decided to do something with their off-season time and the capital they had accrued from playing football, and they opened up a bakery. And she is the sister of the guy he went to UCLA with. So it's best friend's sister. But her brother had his own book, the first book, which was called, I haven't read it, but her brother, his courtship romance was in Fake It Till You Bake It, which is like a social influencer fake relationship kind of thing. Haven't read it yet. I may or may not. I really, really like this one a lot. And she's a social media manager, and she needs a job, and her brother convinces her, well, she actually goes to work for the bakery that her brother runs. She doesn't want to trade in on her brother's connections and names, but she needs to do a special project to get her dream job. And so she's going to work on social media, and romance ensues with this football dude. And he kind of has a viral moment where he kind of comes to the defense of baking because somebody makes a gendered assumption about who bakes and who doesn't. And he's like, women are the backbone of society and they do the work. And that doesn't mean that it's lesser work. And it doesn't mean that men can't do it as well. So anyway, that goes viral. And then she comes in to help them manage the fallout because he's a pretty shy guy. I really liked it. And I'm glad I saw Tiffany's short subject about it. Let's see. I also read Lost Echoes by Joe R. Lansdale. This is a horror thriller. It's about a guy who, when he goes into a room, if he hears certain kinds of sounds, he will, the sounds echo. And he'll go into a room where something violent happened, especially a murder or a violent death, and he'll hear a sound and then watch the whole thing unfold. And it's really stressful for him, of course. This has been true since he was like 6 or 7 years old. He's kind of become almost agoraphobic because he's afraid to go to places that he hasn't been to before because he's like, I am going to, see something really horrifying. And of course, somebody wants him to use that skill to solve a murder. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but I don't remember that much about it. So, it was okay. And now, here's a book that I checked out from Wesleyan Library. These are all from the public library. This is from Wesleyan University Library. It's an academic work called Reading the Romance, Women, Patriarchy, and Popular Literature. It's by Janice Radway. It was originally published in the 1980s, based on research she did in 1981, and it was published in 1984, and this is a reissue from 1994, I believe. Oh, no, not even. 1992. There's a new introduction, but the rest of it's the same. This is kind of considered a classic. And what Janice Radway did was she decided to she was doing American studies, and that's multidisciplinary. And she decided to use an anthropological approach to talking to people who read romance novels. Remember, this is in the early 80s that she was doing this research. And it's really interesting, and she takes the whole thing a lot more seriously than a lot of people were taking romance in those days. It's dense. It has a lot of academic jargon. It is kind of considered groundbreaking, a classic in its field. The thing is that for the most part, she reads all of the books. She talks to these women who read romances, one of whom had a romance recommendations newsletter back in the late 70s, early 80s, before the internet. And so she talks to them, she reads all the books they talk about. And I think for the most part, she's not too condescending, kind of slides into that a little bit, but that's partly a consequence of academic writing. Remember, you're reading this as an anthropological work, so there is that. And however, I think sometimes she does sell these women short. Like she's talking about a scene where a tomboy heroine in an historical romance is like carefully oiling and caressing and admiring her father's sword that she herself uses. And Janice Radway says, well, I don't think the readers that I talked to were aware of the Freudian implications. And I'm like, yes, they are. They're just not talking about it. So, but mostly she doesn't do that. So it's an interesting book to read, especially reading it and comparing it with my own experiences as a romance reader back then and now, especially the differences in how romances are written and marketed and experienced and how we talk about them and how we talk about them now that we have the internet. So that was interesting to me. Another book that I was hoping would have kind of a serious approach to romances and people who read them. It was supposed to be satirical but a love letter to romance novels and the women who read them, well, the people who read them. And that is Female Fantasy by Iman Hariri Kia. And it has a beautiful step back. Look at that. It's a contemporary, The Merman. It's a contemporary about a woman who, she's actually not really a romance reader. She reads like one romantasy series, and the protagonist is very clear that this is romantasy, not romance. It's not the same thing at all. So she's absolutely obsessed with this series. She writes fan fiction, and supposedly she gets hundreds of thousands of comments on her fan fiction. And I'm like, if you're getting hundreds of thousands of comments on your fan fiction, somebody's going to approach you about publishing for real. That's what happened with E.L. James, and everybody made a lot of money off of that. So publishers do keep an eye out, and agents. So, but she's not. She lives in Mystic, Connecticut, which is not too far from where I am. So I thought it would be good local interest. But she's actually, it is not a love letter to romance readers. It's not. She is absolutely obsessed with the male main character from this romantasy series. And she finds out that the author based it on somebody she knew in real life. And she basically internet stalks until she figures out who it is. And she's making plans to go find the guy for real and find out that he's her soulmate. And then they can tumble into bed together. She's stalking this guy. And her brother's best friend, whom she's known forever and who's kind of annoying to her, he insists on tagging along. And I guess they end up being a couple, but I didn't read that far. Let me see if I can find the passage that just really made me give up on the whole thing. The other thing is this first person point of view told entirely from her perspective. So she keeps saying, oh, I am in touch with reality. I am not living in a fantasy world, except that she is. So that doesn't ring true. So this is what she's thinking to herself. She keeps telling us that she's not unhinged. She just really, really loves this book series. And there are excerpts from the book series throughout the book, which was kind of fun, at least as far as I read. She's like, there's no way I can tell my brother, oh, so you know that fictional character I'm obsessed with? Well, as it turns out, he's based on a real person. His name is Ryan, and he lives in New York, and I'm curious about whether or not he's my soulmate. So I'm going to drive to the city, track him down, and try to seduce him. Seriously, she's unhinged and not in a good way. And the fact that she knows enough to say, oh, I'm not obsessed. I'm just going to go stalk this guy and try to figure out if he's my soulmate. I mean, apparently she doesn't end up with him, but this is not a love letter to romance readers. This is suggesting that we're unhinged and obsessive, and our jokes about book boyfriends are something we actually believe in. And I just felt like it was not at all giving me what I was promised. I was a little dubious about the title, frankly, and unfortunately, yeah. So that was a DNF. I'm done talking about this book now. So those are the books I have ready to go back to the library, except for some others that I am going to talk about in a different video because they were for book clubs and buddy reads. I'll just show them really quickly. The Bloody Chamber and The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. This is fairy tale retellings that I read for Kat's Novel Adventures Folklore February. I'm going to talk about that in a different video. Talk about all of these in a different video. The Tea and Biscuits Historical Romance Book Club, The Finest Print by Aaron Langston. And finally, this Anne of Green Gables Omnibus. I only read one book from here, and it was Anne's House of Dreams for an Anne of Green Gables read-along I'm participating in. So I will talk about those in a different video. I hope you enjoyed this roundup. If you did, please like, comment, share, subscribe, or don't. I'm not the boss of you. And I hope you have a good day or night.